I stood in the corner office one last time. The same office I had spent 3 decades building from the ground up, though the corner never belonged to me. It always belonged to him. "So, this is it?" he sneered. "You're finally quitting? After all these years?" He leaned back in his chair, a smug smile curling under his gray mustache. "You think you're too good for this place now?" I placed my resignation letter on his desk, calmly, professionally. His eyes scanned it for 2 seconds before he burst into laughter. "You seriously think you'll find something better at your age? Try begging." I didn't flinch. Just picked up my old leather briefcase. "What's that for?" he scoffed. "Retirement dreams? Gonna hit the beach now, old man?" I paused by the door, then looked him in the eye. "No," I said slowly. "That briefcase holds the contracts. The ones that make me your new boss." His smile vanished. His hands started to shake. And for the first time in 30 years, he was speechless. I joined the company when it was still a cramped office above a hardware store. Back then, there were just 5 of us. No titles, no hierarchy, just hard work and dreams. I wasn't chasing glory. I just wanted to build something that mattered. My name is David Lang. I gave that company 30 years of my life. Missed birthdays. Skipped holidays. Put off my own wedding, twice. Why? Because I believed in what we were creating. And I believed in him. Jonathan Blake, the founder and CEO. A sharp man, no doubt. Charismatic, charming, and ruthless beneath the surface. At first, he treated me like a partner. Asked for my input. Shared late nights and cold takeout with me like brothers chasing a vision. But as we grew, he changed. We brought in new hires, moved to a glass high-rise downtown. Suddenly, I wasn't a partner, I was just another employee. Promotions passed me by, given to people half my age with half my experience. But I kept telling myself, be patient. Loyalty pays off. The real sting came 5 years ago when I proposed a new branch expansion in the Midwest, my brainchild, my groundwork, my projections. He loved the idea. Approved it immediately. 2 weeks later, he announced it at a board meeting, as his own. Not once did he mention my name. That was the first crack. The second came when I overheard him laughing in the break room with the new CFO. "David? He's harmless. Too loyal to ever leave. A good worker bee. A worker bee." I wanted to quit right then. But I didn't. Not because I was afraid, but because I was planning. I had a family to support, and 2 kids in college. I couldn't afford pride. Not yet. But I started observing. Documenting. Networking on the side. Quietly. I began noticing the wasteful contracts. The unethical practices swept under expensive rugs. And I knew, one day, all of this would come back to haunt him. I just needed to be ready when it did. Then came the day I overheard a meeting I wasn't meant to. A merger deal. A buyout. He was planning to sell the company, our company, to an overseas firm known for gutting staff and slashing pensions. That's when the patience died. And the revenge began. You don't give a man 30 years of your loyalty and expect him to sell you out like dead stock on a clearance shelf. But that's exactly what Jonathan did. And that was his first mistake. I didn't confront him. Not yet. That would have been satisfying, but premature. Instead, I made myself invisible. I nodded at his jokes, followed orders, acted like the same loyal David he thought I was. Meanwhile, I was building something far more powerful than rage. I was building leverage. It started with information. I accessed archived emails, internal memos, vendor contracts, every forgotten thread buried in the company's digital filing system. And I found what I expected. Jonathan had been making backdoor deals for years, shell companies, off-the-record payments, double billing. He was dirty. And now, I had the proof. But what's a fuse without a spark? I needed help, someone with resources and reach. That's when I contacted Evelyn. She was an old friend and now VP of Acquisitions at Ashcroft Capital, the very firm Jonathan was negotiating with. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew one thing: she hated liars more than I did. I sent her a heavily redacted dossier. No names. No context. Just the truth. 2 days later, she called me. David, who sent this? I paused. Let's just say, someone with unfinished business. She laughed, but there was something else in her tone: respect. I told her everything. I didn't want to stop the buyout, I wanted in. Not as an employee. As the new owner. You see, over the last 10 years, I'd invested carefully, discreetly. Not flashy. Not loud. But consistently. I bought stock in the parent company, collected silent partnerships, and even helped fund 2 competing firms under different names. I wasn't just an employee. I was an investor, and one with just enough influence to matter when the right domino fell. While Jonathan paraded through the office, playing the charming boss, I was arranging meetings with lawyers. Every smile he gave me, I answered with one of my own. A mask for a mask. The board was my next target. The newer members didn't know the company's history. They only knew numbers, and Jonathan made those look good on paper. But I had the real numbers. I prepared a presentation that detailed not only the internal fraud, but how it would affect the value of the buyout. I scheduled a private board dinner, off-site, off-record. That night, I showed them everything. Silence filled the room when I finished. One of the members, a quiet man named Pierce, leaned forward. Why are you showing us this now? Because, I said, in a week, Jonathan's going to sell this company out from under you. And when the lawsuits come in, and they will, you'll need someone who kept his hands clean. They asked what I wanted. I told them I wasn't asking for their jobs, just their vote. They agreed. Unanimously. Still, I needed to prepare the final blow. Something personal. Something he wouldn't see coming. So I waited. The day before the deal was scheduled to close, Jonathan called an emergency meeting. He walked in, wearing a $2,000 suit, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Big changes are coming, folks, he said. This is a new chapter for us all. I sat in the front row, silent. Calm. He glanced at me, smug. Like a king staring at a servant who still bows. That was his second mistake. The meeting was set to go smoothly. Jonathan had everything planned. He had his speech ready, after all. He'd been practicing in front of the mirror for weeks. A room full of people, most of whom had been loyal to him for years. He expected applause, congratulations, and smooth sailing into his retirement. What he didn't expect was me. He took his position at the front of the room, pretending to command the space as always, with his usual smug smile. "As you all know, we've been in negotiations for months," he said, clapping his hands together. "I'm happy to announce that tomorrow we're closing the deal with Ashcroft Capital, and our future is secure. I've led this company to great success." His voice echoed in the room. But behind it, I heard the whispers of those who had been waiting for the truth. The truth I was about to deliver. I stood up calmly, my briefcase in hand, and slowly made my way to the front of the room. The room went silent. Jonathan stopped mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing. "You have a lot of things to say, don't you, David?" he sneered. "Want to offer your resignation again?" A little late for that. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I placed the briefcase down with deliberate care, then I opened it slowly, revealing a stack of documents. The tension in the room thickened. "You've been selling this company out from under all of us, Jonathan. You've used your position to line your pockets while pushing your employees aside. You've made deals with the enemy, and now you're trying to sell us all out for a fat paycheck." I paused, watching his face shift from confusion to anger. "But what you didn't count on, Jonathan," I continued, "was that I was always 2 steps ahead." A collective gasp filled the room as I pulled out the first document, a series of fraudulent contracts, forged signatures, and secret payments. His secrets were all laid bare. The next document? A signed agreement with Ashcroft Capital that showed they were aware of the fraud, and still chose to move forward. Everything, every single piece of evidence, was right there. Jonathan's face turned pale. His eyes began to shake, his hand twitching uncontrollably as he reached for his glass of water, only to knock it over in his haste. This isn't real." Jonathan stammered, but his voice had no power anymore. I held up one final document, the official buyout offer. But it wasn't just from Ashcroft Capital. It was from me. "I'm the one who bought the company, Jonathan," I said, my voice steady but tinged with the weight of years of patience. "Not Ashcroft. Not you. Me." There was a moment of absolute stillness in the room. Jonathan's face went completely white. The sound of a pin dropping would have been louder than the silence that followed. What is this?" Jonathan whispered, his voice trembling now. You can't. This isn't happening." It was happening. I've been buying up shares for years. You never saw me coming. I've had your secrets the entire time, Jonathan. And now, it's my company. My board. My employees. Your empire is over." The other board members who had once supported him now stared in disbelief, eyes wide, some of them visibly shaking. The realization hit them: Jonathan had been running on borrowed time, and I'd just taken everything back. Jonathan stood frozen, his hands shaking violently. He tried to speak, but no words came out. He was done. He knew it. And I knew it, too. The next few moments were chaotic. Jonathan stumbled backward, as if trying to escape the reality of the situation, but it was too late. His empire had crumbled before him, and there was no way out. I walked out of the meeting room without saying another word. The last thing I saw was Jonathan, standing there, broken, just as I had imagined him all those years. The silence after I left that boardroom was louder than anything I'd ever heard in my life. I didn't look back, not even once. I walked out with my head high and my past finally behind me. For the first time in decades, I felt weightless, free. But I also knew it wasn't over. You see, exposing Jonathan publicly was never the full revenge. It was just the curtain lifting. What came next was Act 2. I spent the next few weeks in a quiet place near the lake. I turned off my phone, disconnected from emails, and for the first time in years, I breathed. I fished at dawn, cooked simple meals, and let the wind tell me stories I'd long forgotten to hear. But once my soul felt steady, I got back to work. I didn't start another company, I invested in people. I became a private advisor to small businesses being bullied by bigger corporations. I worked behind the scenes, coaching underdogs to beat Goliaths like Jonathan. It felt poetic. One of those small businesses was a rising software startup, young, innovative, and desperate to survive after a hostile acquisition. I stepped in, quietly funded them, helped them pivot, and watched them skyrocket. Guess who their biggest competitor was? Yep. Jonathan's firm. At first, it was subtle. Their contracts dried up. Partners left. Key talent resigned, many of whom I personally recruited. Then the media began whispering. Internal corruption, inflated earnings, toxic leadership. I didn't leak anything. I didn't have to. Karma did all the work. And finally, the final blow came, an acquisition offer from an investor group. Jonathan, desperate and drowning, accepted it instantly. A lifeline, he thought. He didn't know that I was the one who had assembled that investor group behind the scenes. So, on a bright Monday morning, nearly 2 years after he had laughed in my face and mocked my retirement, I walked back into that same boardroom. He was sitting at the head of the table, thinner, angrier, and visibly stressed. When he saw me walk in, his lips parted, but no words came out. I smiled. I told you not to laugh, Jonathan. He looked around, confused, but no one said a word. The lead investor cleared his throat and said, Jonathan, meet our new executive chairman. He'll be finalizing the transition. Jonathan's face turned gray. I sat down across from him. I won't stay long, I said. I just came to collect the briefcase you mocked, and sign the papers that make me your boss. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I just let my success, and his downfall, speak. I took over briefly, but only to ensure the company didn't collapse and the employees, the real workers, weren't punished for Jonathan's sins. I kept the good. I cleaned out the rot. And then I stepped away. But before I did, I left Jonathan a handwritten letter. Sometimes the ones you laugh at, mock, and push down, are the ones who were quietly building the staircase you'd eventually fall from. I never wanted revenge. I wanted peace. But you made me choose. Goodbye. Now I live in a quiet coastal town, where the waves crash more consistently than people's promises. Sometimes I think about the 30 years I gave to that company, to a man who never once said thank you. But I don't regret it. Because those years taught me resilience. They taught me that loyalty is not weakness, but a strength that, when misused, becomes a sword. So to anyone listening, don't let them tell you your worth. Don't let them laugh at your dreams. And if they do, let your comeback be so loud, it echoes where their arrogance once stood. And if you ever carry a briefcase into a boardroom after they laughed at you, make sure it holds not just your resignation, but their replacement.